Welcome, everybody. I'm Ingrid Swenson. I'm the director of Peer. And thank you for coming along to celebrate the wonderful Swirl of Words, Swirl of Worlds, a fantastic collection of poetry gathered by Stephen Watts, who's over there. So what we're going to do is celebrate this by inviting some of the contributors, poets and translators to read from the book. If you haven't had a chance to see the exhibition yet, I would encourage you to take a look at the exhibition, which is here at Peer, but also across the road in the library. So do spend some time looking at the work. The book is, as you know, free, and it's going to be distributed by the libraries, all the libraries in Hackney, and we hope that it can make its way around the borough and much further. Stephen's going to do the introductions to all of the individual readers today, so I think we've got about 10 or 12, but maybe it'll expand from there. We don't know. But I just wanted to introduce Stephen and thank him very much for the fantastic work that he's done to put this book together. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Ingrid, very much. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I can see so many friends and friendly faces here, so many, many thanks. We do have 12 poems and more than 12 readers, so I'm going to be pretty brief in my introductions, and I apologize because everybody who is reading could have a lot said about them, so I'll just say that from the start. Also, just to thank every reader, not only for being here today and just coming to agree to read one poem, which is always difficult for a poet. Temptation to read many more poems, obviously, but also for allowing that poem and the translation. Thanks also to all the translators to be included in this book. It meant a huge amount to us to be able to do that in this year of lockdown, in this year when this country left the EU, and also in this year when issues to do with Black Lives Matter have arisen. And it is a great pleasure, actually, to be able to include quite a number of poems bilingually from a range of African languages, which doesn't actually happen so much in anthologies. So the first poem is actually going to be read in Amharic and in English translation. Greetings to the people of Europe by Alemu Tebeje, who's here, and translated by, I think, himself together with Chris Beckett. Alemu is a poet based in London. Please, big welcome to him. Chris Beckett equally is a very, very fine poet based in London and a translator. Without him, we would not have an anthology of Amharic poetry, which was published in 2020 by Karkanet. 360 pages of poetry translated into English from Amharic. What a superb thing.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for the introduction and for the chance to read my work. This poem is dedicated to all Middle East and African migrants who died on Mediterranean Sea while trying to reach Europe. And I'm inspired by the quotation of Jomo Kenyatta, the first president of Kenya after liberation. Jomo Kenyatta said about the following on the arrival of missionaries to Africa. He says, when the missionaries arrived, the Africans had the land, and the missionaries had the Bible. They taught us how to pray with our eyes closed. When we opened them, they had the land, and we had the Bible. So here is my greetings to Europe, to London. Salamta greeting. ሰላምታ ለአውሮፓ ህዝብ አባቶቻችሁ በምድርም በሰማይ አቆራርጠው መጥተው በአፍሪካ መጽሐፍ ቅዱስን በገፍ አሰራጭተው ለቀደምቶቻችን እንደዚህ እያሉ ፍቅር ነበር ሰብከው። ጉንጭህን ለሚመታ ደግሞ ሁለተኛውን ስጠው፣ መጎናጸፊያንም ለሚወስድ እጀ ጠባብህም ደግሞ አትከልክለው። አሁንም የነሱ ልጅ ልጆች እኛ የአባቶቻችሁ ልምድ ወራሽ ህመምተኛ፣ የሴል የርዛት የግፍ ሰለባዎች፣ በአገር በቃል ጨቋኝ የዕድሜ ልክ ገዢዎች፣ ባህር አቆራርጠን ባረጁ ጀልባዎች፣ አስፈሪ ማዕበል የተፋ እንግልቶች፣ በጨዋማው ንፋስ በድንበር ጠባቂ ወታደሮቻችሁ፣ በጥፊ ተላክተን መለማላችንን ቆመን ከፊታችሁ፣ ከሞት የተረፍን ይዘው እያወጡ ዘይት እንደገቡ ብርቅ ወፎቻችሁ፣ ይኸው መጨረሻ ማንኳኳት ይዘናል ደርሰን ከብራችሁ። የተስፋ ቅራሬ ተስፋ በመሰነቅ እንዳልተረሷችሁ እኒያ የፍቅር ቃላቱ ለእኛ አባቶች እናንት ያኔ የሰበኩቱ። አመሰግናለሁ። ታንክ ዩ።
Greetings to the people of Europe. Over land and sea, your fathers came to Africa and unpacked Bibles by the thousand, filling our ancestors with words of love. If someone slaps your right cheek, let him slap your left cheek too. If someone takes your coat, let him take your trousers too. Now we, their children's children, inheriting the words your fathers left behind, our bodies slapped and stripped by our lifetime presidents, are braving seas and leaky boats, cold waves of fear. Let salt winds punch our faces and your coast guards pluck us from the water like oily birds. But here at last we are to knock at your front door, hoping against hope that you remember all those lovely words your fathers preached to ours. Thank you.
Thank you very much for starting us off with that poem. The next poem is by a Swiss-Italian poet. There is also a poem by an Italian poet in the anthology. It's a poem by Giorgio Orelli, who was a really tremendous poet from Switzerland, writing in Italian. The poem's going to be read by another very, very good Swiss-Italian poet, Vanni Bianconi, who runs a wonderful festival in Switzerland, poetry festival, but also who lives locally, maybe about 5 or 10 minutes walk from here. But the translation of the poem by Giorgio Orelli is by Loren Bianconi, leader, who is here, and besides being a wonderful translator, also happens to be Vanni's daughter by some spare chance. So Vanni will read the poem first, and then we'll put the microphone down a bit. Thank you, Vanni. Yep.
Hi, thank you, Stephen. Giorgio Orelli is a beautiful poet from the Italian side of Switzerland. When we thought that Loren could translate some poems, it was an occasion for me to read a few poems of my favorite Italian language poets to her. And she had like a dozen, and so she listened patiently. And this is the poem she chose. So this is the poem she liked the most. And I think you're gonna see why. The Italian title is Dal buffo buio, sotto una falda della mia giacca, tu dici: io vedo l'acqua di un fiume che si chiama Ticino, lo riconosco dai sassi. Vedo il sole che ha un fuoco e se lo tocchi senza guanti ti scotti. Devo dire una cosa alla tua ascella, una cosa pochissimo da ridere. Che neve bizantina. Sento un rumore, un odore di strano, c'è qualcosa che non funziona, forse lucchetto, non so, ma forse mi confondo con prima. Pensa, se io fossi una rana, quest'anno morirei. Vedi gli ossiuri, gli ussari, gli ossimori, vedi i topi andarsene con punti dal centro storico verso il governo? Vedo due che si occhiano, vedo la sveglia che ci guarda in ginocchio, vedo un fiore che c'era il vento, vedo un morto ferito, vedo il pennello dei tempi, il tuo giovane pennello da barba, vedo un battello morbido. Vedo te, ma non come attraverso il cono del gelato. E poi vedo una cosa che comincia per gn. Cosa? Niente. Era solo per dirti che son qui, solo per salutarti.
Hi. Lily. From the shiny shade, underneath the skirts of my coat, you say, I see the water of a river called Ticino. I recognize it from its stones. I see the sun that's of fire, and if you touch it without gloves, you'll burn yourself. I have to say something to your armpit, something not in the least funny. What Byzantine snow? I hear a sound, a smell of strange. Is there something not working? Maybe the thermometer, I don't know. But maybe I'm confusing before and now. Think, if I were a frog, I would die this year. Do you see the lassos, the lasses, the lassies? Do you see the mice take their leave with their little prickled tails from the stark centre towards the government? I see two who share a sharp glare. I see the alarm watching us on its knees. I see a flower that was the wind. I see an injured dead. I see the paintbrush of the times of time, your young shaving brush. I see a soft boat. I see you, but not as if I were looking through an ice cream cone. And then I see something beginning with no. What? Nothing. It was only to tell you that I'm here, just to say hello.
Thank you both very much for that lovely, lovely reading. Well done. Thank you. The next poet is a friend of mine for the past 30 years, Amajit Chandan, one of the finest Punjabi poets, one of the finest poets writing in Punjabi anywhere. Amajit has been living in London now for over 30 years, nearly 40 years, yes, having been living in India prior to that. I'll ask him to come and read now, and I'm going to read his... Oh, do you want me to read the English first? Yeah. I'm going to read the English first because Amajit has two books, wonderful books published by Art Publications in Punjabi and in English. This is a rare poem of his that he wrote originally in English and then translated into Punjabi. So therefore, I'm going to read the English first on Amajit's behalf. Mapping Memories. Imagine it as a paper. Look at it. It is a portrait of the earth. See where the needle of your magnetic heart stops. That's it. That's the place you always missed. Put a dot. Touch it with your fingertip. Softly. It throbs. Then put another, then another, till a line is formed. The umbilical cord reconnecting. The spot is a cartograph of your memories. It is a wound healed. A dot shines on the page at the 0 degree of all directions. Here ends your returning. You are home.
First, I'll like to read a quote from Octavio Paz. He said, "In writing an original poem, we are translating the word. Everything we do is translation." यादां दी नक्शा नवीसी फर्ज करो ਇਹ ਕਾਗਜ਼ ਹੈ। ਦੇਖੋ ਗੌ ਨਾ ਚਿਤਵੋ, ਇਹ ਧਰਤੀ ਦਾ ਨਕਸ਼ਾ ਹੈ। ਦੇਖੋ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਦਿਲ ਦੀ ਸੂਈ ਮੈਗਨਾਤੀਸੀ ਕਿਸ ਥਾਂ ਪਰ ਜਾकर ਰੁਕਦੀ ਹੈ। ਹਾਂ, ਇੱਥੇ ਹੀ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਬਸਤੀ ਜਿਸ ਥਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਤਰਸਦਿਆਂ ਉਮਰਾਂ ਬੀਤ ਗਈ। ਇਸ ਨੁਕਤੇ ਨੂੰ ਪੋਟੇ ਨਾਲ ਛੁਹਾਵੋ ਸਹਿਜ ਮਲਕੜੇ। ਦੇਖੋ ਇਹ ਦਿਲ ਦੇ ਵਾਂਗੂ ਧੜਕ ਰਿਹਾ। ਲਾਂਦੇ ਜਾਵੋ ਨੁਕਤਾ ਦਰ ਨੁਕਤਾ, ਬਣਦੀ ਜਾਵੇ ਰੇਖਾ, ਜੁੜਦਾ ਜਾਵੇ ਨਾੜੂ ਕੱਪਿਆ। ਇਹੋ ਨੁਕਤਾ ਨਕਸ਼ਾ ਹੈ, ਇਹੋ ਥਾਂ ਹੈ ਯਾਦਾਂ ਦੀ ਕੋਈ ਜ਼ਖਮ ਨਿਸ਼ਾਨੀ। ਇਹ ਬਿੰਦੂ ਹੈ ਜਗਮਗ ਜਗਮਗ ਕਰਦਾ ਕਾਗਜ਼ ਉੱਤੇ, ਜਿੱਥੇ ਤੇਰੀ ਪਿਛਲੀ ਯਾਤਰਾ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਮੁੱਕਣੀ। ਪਰਦੇਸੀ ਆਖਿਰ ਆਪਣੇ ਘਰ ਪੁੱਜਾ ਹੈ।
Wow, Amajit, thank you. The next poem is by Branko Milikovic, a Serbian poet who died, I guess, about 50 years ago. And it's going to be, the text is going to be read in Serbian by Kristina Pribišić-Zorić, who's one of the foremost translators of let's say ex-Yugoslav writers, wonderful translator. And the translation, though, is by Susan Curtis, who is going to read her translation. So Susan also is the editor of Istros Books, which publishes many titles from the wider ex-Yugoslavia. Please welcome them both.
Just a little note about Branko Milkovic. He committed suicide in Zagreb. He was Serbian born. And just as there was an urgency to his brief life, so there is in his poetry, as I read it anyway. And lastly, he was very prolific for someone who was only 27 when he left this world. He published a lot of poetry, wrote essays, translated from French. So I am sure he would love Susie's translation. The poem is called Noć jača od sveta. O koje li je vreme u kosmosu, sazdan od zvezda, rujni ponor sveta, prevazilaziš se maglom preko sveta, nema uspavanke za srditu joj rosu. Jača od sveta noć tajnih prepleta, očara prazninu zaspalog tela što se osu zvezdama kad san ti sadi u potiljku lozu i ptice sleću u kamen sletla. Nek župlja senka nestanak tela slavi, jedno je vreme u srcu, drugo u glavi. Bujnu nevidljivo sa svih strana čuje, mi znamo da je od prošlosti veče sve čega nema i što biti neće i da svet ovaj prazno odjekuje.
Oh, what time does the cosmos show, ruddy abyss of flowers, of stars hurled. You transcend with mist through the world. There is no lullaby for its angry dew. Stronger than the world, night of woven secrets, enchanting the void of a body strewn with stars. Sleep planting a vine in your neck bones, while birds from the delta dive into stone. Let hollow shadow celebrate the body that's fled. It's one time in the heart, another in the head. Invisibility's abundance echoes all around. We know that greater than the past is all that is missing, never to be, while this world resounds emptily.
Thank you very much. The next poem is by a French-Algerian poet, Anna Grecki, who died in childbirth in the 1960s. And before that was very, very involved in the movement towards Algerian independence. The translation, and it's from a book that was published last year bilingually by Smokestack, of Anna Grecki's poems, first translation into English, translation by Christina Viti and Suhaila Haimish, and they will read the poem in French and in English. I should say a lot more about both of them, but I probably haven't got time. So let's listen. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, so thanks, Stephen, and thanks everyone for being here. We wanted to translate Anna Grecki because this was someone who gleefully and heavily threw her life away for independence and was an activist in multilingualism. After independence in Algeria, she saw monolingual policies being imposed on the country that she had died for. She died in childbirth, yes, but she had been producing and writing the best poetry in the teeth of very literal torture. We're going to, nonetheless, read a poem that was written on what was a fishing village that became one of the segregated beaches, where she, as a child, growing up in Algeria, would have seen rich colonizers on one side of the beach and the poor natives on the other. Nonetheless, she wrote this with the most sensual elegance that we humbly tried to echo.
The poem, the title is Colo. La mer.
Vas-y, Kaina. La mer se baigne.
La mer se baigne, seule au bord de ma mémoire, dans la douceur corrosive de nos jeunesses et sous le poids de tant d'années décomposées, des éclats de vie jaillissent comme des dards. Dans la montée d'images déchirées, nos cœurs, ces méduses, aux ombrelles molles, palpitent avec le bruissement des mots qui se remettent à pétrir de leur corps la nue réalité. Image de la paix, image de la guerre, la parole de miel et la goutte de sang, la vague ajoute à la vague, terre née, la langue et le roseau remuent le souvenir.
La main de place un cri planté près d'un ruisseau. Est-ce hier ou demain que les galères roulaient les hurlements de qui mourait? La main hésite et traîne dans les eaux multipliées. Ici et là, on meurt. Chaque homme connaît la peur. Je ne distingue plus la nuit du jour levé, ni l'enfant désarmé du maquisard debout. Je ne distingue plus, à l'oreille du retour, qu'un rumeur aveugle où le temps s'élargit.
The sea is bathing alone at my memory's edge, in the corrosive tenderness of your youth, and under the heavy mulch of so many years, bursts of life shoot up like arrows. In the swell of torn apart images, our hearts, sea jellies with soft and moist saucers, are pulsing with the whisper of words whose bodies need bear reality anew. Images of peace, images of war, word of honey and drop of blood, wave adding born earth to wave, memory stirred by language and reed.
The hand displaces a howl planted by a stream. Was it yesterday or tomorrow that pebbles were roiling the screaming of those about to die? The hand falters and trails in the refracted waters. I can no longer tell broad daylight from night, or the harmless child from the upright partisan. I can no longer make out on the edge of return anything but a blind buzzing where time expands.
Thank you very much to Christina and Suhaila. Yeah, and thanks for saying more about Anna Grecki, because I didn't describe her life very well. The next poem is by a superb poet from Nepal. I was lucky enough to come across a book of his in translation about 40 years ago, and he's stayed with me all that time. Lakshmi Prasad Devkota. He must have died about 60, 70 years ago. We're very lucky today that the text in Nepali will be read by the poet Rupak Shrestha, who lives in London. Thank you very much for being here. And the translation, which is by Michael Hutch, will be read by Michael. So please welcome them both. Thank you.
Just to explain a quick note on the poem itself. This is actually an extract from a 45-page narrative poem called Muna Madan, the story of Muna and Madan, written by Devkota, as Stephen says, who later became the Mahakavi, the great poet of Nepali literature, and died in 1959. It was published first in the 1930s when Devkota himself was only in his early 20s. And it's the adaptation of an old folk tale about a Nepali trader from Kathmandu who goes to Lhasa in Tibet to try to make his fortune and bring back gold and musk. He's entranced by Lhasa. He overstays. He stays longer than he said he would. And when he gets back to Kathmandu, he finds his mother has died of old age, and his wife Muna is about to die of sorrow because a man in the street has lied to her and told her that her husband will never return. So the poem as a whole conveys this message about the importance of one's duty to one's homeland and one's family, and also contains many messages of moral resistance to an oppressive regime which governed Nepal at that time. So Rupikji will read the Nepali and I will read the translation.
Thank you, Michael. Actually this Muna Madan is kind of short epic, which can be sung as well. It is written in a very nice meter called Chauri, but I will read out here. I won't be singing here. So the poem goes this way. अकेली मुना अत्यन्तै राम्री कमल झैं फुलेकी बादलको चाँदी किनारा छोई जुन झैं खुलेकी कलिला ओठ खोलेर हाँस्दा मोती नै बर्सन्थ्यो पुसको फुल सुकेर गइन् आँसु नै बर्सन्थ्यो लाम्चिला आँखा पुछेर गर्थिन् सासुको सुसार कोठामा सुत्दा तकिया भिज्थ्यो चिन्ताले हजार मनको दुःख मनमै राख्छिन् नबोली छुपाई छातीको सर पन्छीको प्वाख राख्दछ लुकाई उज्यालो हुन्छ दिनको अन्त्य बत्तीको धिपधिपमा वैलौँदो फुल झन् हुन्छ राम्रो शरदको समीपमा बादलको कालो किनारा चाँदी झन्झन उज्यालो बिदाको बदन झल्कन्छ मनमा दुःखको उज्यालो फुलमा खस्छ शीतको आँसु आकाशमा वर्षा जल रातका आँसु ताराका ज्योति टप्कन्छ महितल गुलाब मिठो जरामा बन्छ किराको आहार गुलाब मिठो जरामा बन्छ किराको आहार सहरभित्र फुलेको फुल दुष्टको शिकार मानिसको हात निर्मल पानी हिलोले भर्दछ मानिसलाई बाटोमा काँडा मानिसले छर्दछ अत्यन्त राम्री इमुना हाम्री झ्यालमा बसेकी सहरको एउटा गुण्डाले देख्यो अप्सरा खसेकी भवानीलाई कातेर बत्ती बेयाद रहेकी गालाको पाटो कानको लोती कपाल घुम्रेकी त्यो छड्के दर्शन पाएर उभियो पागलै भएर घरको वर घरको पार त्यो घुम्थ्यो गएर गुलाबलाई देखेर राम्रो हे भाइ नछुनु गुलाबलाई देखेर राम्रो हे भाइ नछुनु लोभले हेर्यो मोहनी गयो जङ्गली नहुनु सिर्जनाभित्र रचना राम्रा नजरका जुहार ईश्वरको हाँसो पाएको फुल छोएर नमार ईश्वरको हाँसो पाएका फुल छोएर नमार. Thank you.
Muna in her solitude. Muna alone, as beautiful as the flowering lotus, like moonlight touching the cloud's silver shore. Her gentle lips smile, a shower of pearls, but she wilts like a flower as winter draws near, and soon her tears rain down. Wiping wide eyes, she tends Mudden's mother, but when she sleeps in her lonely room, her pillow is soaked by 1,000 cares. She hides her sorrow in her heart, concealing it in silence, like a bird which hides with its wing the arrow which pierces its heart. She is only bright by the flickering lamp when the day draws to its close. A wilting flower's beauty grows while autumn is approaching, when the clouds' dark edges are silver and the moon shines ever brighter. Sadness glares in her heart, recalling his face at their parting. Wintry tears fall on the flower. Starlight, the night's tears, drip down onto the earth. A rose grows from the sweetest roots, but roots are consumed by worms. The bud which blooms in the city is the prey of evil men. Pure water is sullied by dirt from a human hand. Men sow thorns in the paths of men. Most lovely are Muna at her window. A city rascal saw her, a fallen fairy, making a lamp for the goddess Vanni, oblivious to all. He saw the tender lobes of her ears, saw her hair in disarray, and with this heavenly vision he rose like a madman and staggered away. You see the rose is beautiful, but brother, do not touch it. You look with a desire entranced, but be not like a savage. The things of creation are precious gems. A flower contains the laughter of God. Do not kill it with your touch.
Do not kill it.
Thank you, Rupak, and thank you, Michael, very much. I guess just a quick reminder that this anthology, this collection, is based on the languages spoken in Hackney. Not of poets living in Hackney, but of the languages spoken in Hackney. The next poem is from Persian, and is a poem by Ziba Kabasi, who has been a friend of mine for very many years, and we've translated her poetry together. Ziba is one of the foremost poets writing in Persian, Farsi, anywhere around the world at the moment. Lezgi dance. Lezgi that blade shudders grenade pins. Lezgi that shatter stomps grapes into wine. That cuts the deck of the earth and explodes love, that fountains a dream into its own language, language that tricks out its own dream. And the fall and rise of throat breath, Lezgi, inside clerical weapons and criminal sham, inside chemical weapons and crimson blood, Lezgi, gi, go, grow to the height of breath, heave the devil's tail up its own ass, headbutt your head on death's forehead, rub your shoulders on the cold air, Lezgi, pure heart matter, pulsing and pumping, stamp a one step forward, two back dance, sit, dance, sleep softer than soil fallen rain, hailstones and wolverines kneeing into stone, slapping pain on calm's tender balm, Lezgi, a girl's eyes on the front line, cobraing right, a young guy sleeving away hidden poisons, bitterness on the rim and lining of the cup, there at the round table of bluebirds, Lejki, with listening devices there in all the corners, with camera babes sat round their tables, with king and clown and killer, Lejki, your deer and tiger and forest, Lejki, you leap on sabre and broken glass, Lejki, ever straining one neck higher than before, Sufi of all dancers, my young Sufi, there at the height of the minaret, the swung censer of the high altar, circling spun dancer between sun and time, and poem breath from Sham's azure roots. Lejki, from life to life, dance. Lejki, dance. Live and don't die, Lejki. Don't ever die. Thank you, Ziva, very much. The next poem is from Bulgarian and will be read in Bulgarian and in English by Kristina Kuneva, who wrote the poem and is standing somewhere with her baby. Her book of poems, though. Her baby's over there. Kristina has been living in London for a number of years. She's a very, very fine poet. She wrote this poem during lockdown, and it's a very strong evocation of lockdown. So please welcome Kristina Kuneva.
When you move to a new country, or at least that was my experience, there is a certain period of time when you feel you're neither here nor there. And me being here today, reading in both Bulgarian and English, really does make me feel more here. So thank you everyone from Peer Gallery, and thank you, Stephen. Лондон, където нощем Дилан Томас хапе пръстите на белите си музи. Денем карантиненото небе кипи от живот. Гарвани и гларуси летят в отрицателното море. В не морето, нагоре от хоризонта. Лондон, където кротко пуска музика за слона в стаята. Той никога не забравя. Затова му подбирам най-деликатните звуци. Един стъклен тайк с червен ореол свобода около челото, побран в апартамент на Бърдет Роуд, твърде голям, за да може да скочи през прозореца. И все пак има някаква велика синхроничност в това. Бавно кървя, орхидеята бавно цъфти, ям филия с лютеница и очаквам луната в рамката на прозореца и дано не видя самолет. Във време на световна карантина бих умряла от любопитство да разбера къде отиват пътниците му. Наистина ли животът продължава? Непоносимата шега на битието. Имаме срок на годност, по-кратък от въпросите. There was a lovely pair of father and daughter earlier. I wished someday would be like this with my daughter, who was born just 2.5 months ago. But yes, I hope her pronunciation will be much better than mine. Still, you'll need to excuse me for now. London, where at night Dylan Thomas bites the white calves of his muses. During the day, the quarantine sky is boiling with life. Crows and gulls fly in the negative sea. In the non-sea, risen up from the horizon. London, where I gently play music for the elephant in the room. She never forgets. This is why I choose the most delicate sounds for her. A glass tyke with red halo of freedom around the forehead, barely fitted in an apartment on Burdett Road, too big to jump out the window. And yet, there is some great synchronicity in that. I bleed slowly, the orchid slowly blooms. Eating peppers and toast, I wait for the moon in the window frame, and I hope I don't see an airplane. At a time of global quarantine, I would die out of curiosity to find out where its passengers go. Does life really go on? The unbearable joke of being. We have a shelf life shorter than the questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christina. Who it was a great pleasure to meet about 18 months ago. Thank you. The next poem is from Irish Gaelic, which actually wasn't on the list, technically, of languages spoken in Hackney. But I know at least 2 Irish Gaelic speakers in Hackney, so we added it. The poem is by Nuala Nidonal, who's one of the foremost poets writing in Irish at the moment. Quite a number of her books are translated into English, quite easily available. The poem's going to be read, and it was also translated by, so he'll read his English translation by, and I'm going to mispronounce his name, I'm sorry, I shouldn't, by Kevin McGeely. So please welcome him, and many, many thanks for being here.
Well, first I'd like to thank Ingrid for the kind invitation to contribute to this wonderful project, and of course to congratulate Stephen for his Trojan work in producing this gorgeous book. Among the earliest writings in Irish Gaelic, almost a millennium and a half ago now, are a number of short nature lyrics written by early Irish monks in the margins of manuscripts. The late Seamus Heaney once praised these for their steel-nibbed exactness. This poem was written much more recently, of course, as you heard from Stephen, by my good friend Nuala Ní Dhomhnaill, who is the most celebrated poet currently writing in Irish. Its title is An Chaor Duig, which in English is The Northern Lights. An Chaor Duig. An Chaor Duig, Olagón bog bín na crunne e casa a farsid, Siusca na gaithe grianda os cian folús an divagáin, Dám mascalach an dain a faidir yal, a sailsú an bhainné de sfeid. Titin bréithre na tangan daun de seo chun talamh ceann cheann, in a néalta bána is uaine nos Curtini. And the English translation, The Northern Lights. The northern lights, the soft, sweet lamentation of the world spinning on its axis, the whisper of a solar wind above the black abyss, the planet's strenuous poem, its shining prayer illuminating the magnetosphere. The words of this planetary tongue fall to earth one by one in clouds of white and green like a curtain fall. Thank you.
3 more poets and poems on the list. I recognize, I see in the audience speakers of Lithuanian, Greek, Hungarian, and more, and it's very tempting to enlist them to come and read the poem, but I think it depends on how much energy and patience we have after we've read these last 3 poems. But let's see. I'll take the nod or not from Ingrid on that. Incidentally, or not incidentally, but many, many thanks, Ingrid, for publishing this book and doing everything for it and the exhibition. The next poem is Bengali, is written in Bengali, and both the poet and the translator are British Bangladeshi poets living in East London. Both of them long-time friends of mine. poet is Milton Rahman, who's very active in Bangladeshi UK television. And the translator, also a poet in her own right, is Farah Naz. So I will ask them to come and read Milton's poem, Passion.
First of all, I love to give thanks to the Stephen and PS, and that Stephen's actually included my poem in this prestigious publication. And my poem about actually human emotion, also a homesickness traveler. I'm going to read Bengali one. My poems actually wonderfully translated by my friend Faranas. Sometimes translation could be better than original one. She did it wonderfully. Anurag. বাতাসের আঁচল ভেঙে চিনেছি পথের নিশানা বাতাসে আঁচল ভেঙে চিনেছি পথের নিশানা ওই পথ আফিমের গ্রাণ বুধ হয়ে আছে সুঁয়ের ডগায় একবার তোমার বক্ষে নিশুতি রাত হব ভাঙব যাবতীয় ব্যবধান একবার তোমার বক্ষে নিশুতি রাত হব ভাঙব যাবতীয় ব্যবধান যেটুকরু চাঁদ তুমি পান করিয়েছ মায়ায় যেটুকরু চাঁদ তুমি পান করিয়েছ মায়ায় সে মায়ালগ্ন পথের দূরত্ব মাপতে নেই বাতাসের আঁচল ভেঙে চিনেছি পথের নিশানা ওই পথ আফিমের ঘ্রাণে বুধ হয়ে আছে সুয়ের ডগায়
Hello everyone, good afternoon, Shagotom, Dhonnobad. Thank you, Stephen, for including Bengali here, and we are very privileged to represent Bengali language, which we take pride in. In this poem, Milton has used a word, the whole poem is in Bangla, and there is a word called achol. Achol in English, if I translate literally, it means veil, but if I would have put that word veil, that wouldn't have justify the true meaning. Like there is this word called chicken tikka masala and jalfraji, which you cannot use in any other way because that is the essence. So I did keep that word achol because in sari there is this dupatta kind of thing, pallu or veil. That veils means so much to a Bengali people, Bengali community, because veil could be something a toddler or child holds on to, a veil where your affectionateness hold on to, and also veil is something anyone would like to take nestle in. It's very close to the Bengali heart, so that's why I kept the word here. So I'm going to read the poem. It's called Passion. Through the archel of winds, I mustered the trail of path, needle-sharp twinges in my heart. Surely I will descend as dark night. I will descend as dark night in the cave of your bosom, breaking all distance between us. You let me test a slice of moon under your sweet spell. You let me test a slice of moon under your sweet spell. Let's not measure the magic of this love in mere distance. Through the archel of winds, I will master the trail of the path. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Milton, and thanks, Farah. Many thanks. I'm not sure if I should be in this book, but I am. Especially as I'm from across the border in Tower Hamlets. I mean, that's pushing my luck a wee bit. A very little light. Simply for the breath of staying alive, I should talk to you. Simply to pass some words across a table as bread or oil, and not have them die in me, or die in you. And as I measure by measure slowly toss the crisp herbs of speech over towards your face, a very little light will come into my eyes. A very little light will glow out at you and enter your eyes, and will be returned to me, and will calm our mouths against duplicity. And when all the bitter fratricides are piled up about us, this little light, this tiny flame out on the waste patch, this wind-shaped tent that is your eye with its slow torch, this flickered heart with its ventricles that beat and pump, will provoke in us a bonfire and the will to live. And even from the embers there will glow a little light, a very little shining light, as we pass some words across the table, simply for the breath of staying alive. And the final poem in the program is by Federico Garcia Lorca, wonderful Garcia Lorca. From the poem of Unforeseen Love. It'll be read in Spanish and in her English co-translation by Jane Joran. Jane is a very, very fine poet with many books to her credit and many books to come also from Carcanet now. That's great. She translated the poem with Gloria Garcia Lorca, and indeed Jane's father was very close to Federico Garcia Lorca. So there is a direct connection in this reading now of this poem between now in 2021 and going back to 1935-36. Astonishing. Please welcome Jane Joran.
This poem is the first poem in a book by Lorca, which was published posthumously, and the book is called the Tamarit Divan, El Divan del Tamarit, and it's the book was Lorca wrote it in homage to the Arab poets of Granada, the book is divided into ghazals and qasidas, so he sort of adapted these Arab and Persian forms. And it's really, it's an amazing book. It's one of his last books. He finished it in 1934. And it's a book about passionate love, really. The poems are about passionate love. So I'll read first in Spanish. Del amor imprevisto. Nadie comprendía el perfume de la oscura magnolia de tu vientre. Nadie sabía que martirizabas un colibrí de amor entre los dientes. 1000 caballitos persas se dormían en la plaza con luna de tu frente, mientras que yo enlazaba 4 noches tu cintura, enemiga de la nieve. Entre yeso y jazmines, tu mirada era un pálido ramo de simientes. Yo busqué para darte por mi pecho las letras de marfil que dicen siempre, 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 jardín de mi agonía, tu cuerpo fugitivo para siempre, la sangre de tus venas en mi boca, tu boca ya sin luz para mi muerte. So, del amor imprevisto means of unforeseen love, that wonderful love that comes on you suddenly. So, of unforeseen love. No one understood the perfume of the dark magnolia of your belly. No one knew that you martyred a hummingbird of love between your teeth. 1,000 little Persian horses slept in the moonlit plaza of your forehead as I entwined 4 nights round your waist, enemy of the snow. Between gypsum and jasmine, your gaze was a pale branch of seeds. I searched my breast to give you the ivory letters that say always, 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 garden of my agony, your body forever fugitive, the blood of your veins in my mouth, your mouth with no light for my death.
Well, that was fantastic. Thank you, everybody, for coming along. I think we're going to, I don't know, people might still have a poem in their heart they'd like to. I just wanted to thank all of the poets, translators, readers, but particularly Stephen for putting...